Hello everybody, here's the post-fight analysis of Zhang versus Parker and Joshua versus Ngannou. So, Parker pulls off the W versus Zhilei Zhang. It may not have been as barn burner of a fight as perhaps we were hoping for, but it was dramatic nevertheless. Now, whether you think Parker deserved the W or not, he did eke it out, and I'll break this down numerically. He did eke it out versus Zhang, even though Zhang dropped him twice in rounds 3 and rounds 8. Now, on the other hand, Anthony Joshua made a clear statement by just knocking out Francis NGANNOU in the second round. But let's go back to Zhang versus Parker. So, what I really liked about what Joseph Parker did was he used a lot of up and down, going to the head and the body, or faking to the one and then going to the other. And he also used both sides, like he body shifted to the right and to the left. He used his jab constantly, just constantly peppering Zhang with the jab, whether it landed on a target or not. He just kept it busy, and that, I think, was absolutely key to his getting the W in this fight. Third thing he did was he definitely used, Joseph Parker used angles well and didn't just go straight in and straight out. He'd go in and then kind of pivot out, which allowed him to just continually pepper Zhilei Zhang. So let's look at what Zhang did well. Well, he did manage to land his nice straight left and drop Parker. So, you know, hats off to him for doing that. And of course, he did it the way he always does it, with it's not loaded up on, it's not telegraphed at all. It looks like, it doesn't look like a big punch, but it's an effective punch because he's so relaxed as he throws it. So now, how did Zhang manage to not win the fight in spite of dropping Parker 2 times? Okay, so we kind of have to break this down numerically. And so let's pretend that we're in Zhang's corner, and it's at the end of the 8th. He's back in the corner after 8. Now, this is the second time, mind you, that he's dropped Parker. So we're happy because we're in his corner and he's happy, but we've got to let, logic prevail here. So because Zhang dropped Parker twice, that means for those 2 rounds, he has 20 points. Parker has 16. So that's 2 rounds accounted for. Now we're at the end of the 8th, so that there's an additional 6 rounds. So it's never safe to assume that that you're winning, in a sense. You always want to think sort of worst case scenario. So worst case scenario, let's say Parker won all 6 rounds, other than the 3rd and the 8th. That would mean Parker now has 60 points versus Zhang, who lost those 6 rounds. So 6 times 9 is 54. So at the end of 8, if we assume worst case scenario and we're in Zhang's corner, that means Zhang has 74 points. It's the 54 for 6 losing rounds plus 2 winning rounds for dropping Parker. That's 20, so he has 74. Parker, on the other hand, has 60 points for winning the 6 rounds, plus the 2 that he got dropped in, so that's 16. So he has 76. So worst case scenario, after 8 rounds, Zhang is down 2 points. So what does that mean? If you're in Zhang's corner, you know that means he must win rounds 9, 10, 11, and 12 to get the 40 points to put him at 114, and for Joshua's hand to be the 76 points from the first 8 plus only 36, 4 times 9, which would leave Parker with the 112. So it's simple math. If you're Zhang's corner, you know darn well, okay, you gotta tell this to your fighter. Hey, we need the next. I know you just dropped him, but we need the next 4 rounds, big time. You have to let your hands go. These next 4 rounds, we've got to take them. This is crucial. So I don't know what was communicated to Zhang in any of the rounds, because I just couldn't hear the corner work. If somebody knows where it is out there on YouTube land, please let me know, because I would love to hear it. But that's the sort of to set the scene heading into the 9th round, right? Now, what actually went down? Well, unfortunately, as one of the British commentators pointed out, it's almost as if Zhang was his own best worst enemy by dropping Parker twice, because it's like he took his foot off the gas a little too much. And specifically what he did from 9 through 12, which I did not like, was he just put up the double high guard and kind of waited for Parker to, I assume, to try to counter. Now that didn't work out in his favor, and that's the problem with setting and waiting to be the counter puncher, and why that's really not a good strategy or tactic to ever adopt, because should your counter not connect, you're up a creek, because you allowed the other fighter to just initiate all the action, which is pretty much what happened during this fight. I guess I'm not sure. I'm not sure what Zhang was thinking. Only he knows, and only his corner knows what was what the instructions were between rounds. But he did not have the sense of urgency that he needed in order to secure the win. Okay, so let's look at the judges' scorecards. One person did have it a draw, 113-113. That means they gave Zhang 5 total rounds, which means 3 rounds in addition to the 2 where he dropped Parker, and he gave Parker 7 rounds. I mean, I think actually that is a little bit generous towards Zhang, only because you know, Zhang just was not active enough to definitively award a lot of rounds. Now, I would assume that those rounds that judge gave to Zhang were in the earlier part of the fight, but I have not seen the scorecards, so I can't tell you. Now, 2 other judges, of course, had the scorecards in Parker's favor. One person had it 112 for Zhang, 114 for Parker, which means they gave Zhang 4 rounds and they gave Parker 8. I would say, and honestly, that seems a little like in the right ballpark. Although, in this particular case, because Zhang was coming in with the belt, I couldn't argue with a draw either. It's one of those sort of toss-ups. So now the one judge who scored it 111 for Zhang and 115 for Parker means they only gave 1 additional round to Zhang. They gave Zhang the 3 rounds in total, and they gave Parker 9. So that indicates to me that they really just looked for who was the busier fighter. And honestly, I mean, I do think that's a little harsh, but Zhang kind of gave they gave both judges the chance to take those rounds from him and give them to Parker, simply because he was not active enough. Sure, he landed the more effective power punches, but that does not win you the fight in a 12-round fight. So, my understanding is they do have a rematch clause, so there's not really a question of what's next for either one of them. I assume Zhang's team will enact the rematch clause and there'll be a rematch. But, you know, I think it's not so much what Zhang failed to do in this fight. It's really more hats off to Joseph Parker. You know, I think we've got to give him his props because Parker really stepped up to the plate for the fight versus Zhang. And he already stepped up the plate with Deontay Wilder. Now, I think his big win over Wilder was a real mental boost for him stepping into this next fight against Zhang. I mean, regardless of who Parker fought after he fought Wilder, I think he just had a big mental boost. It's not so much ego, like, oh, look who I beat. It's really more just him having that inner confidence of knowing, you know, I dealt with this guy that they said was, you know, at one point, had the big eraser, as Teddy Atlas would call it, with that right hand. And Parker took it right to him and just dominated and really hurt Deontay, maybe beyond repair. I don't know at this point if Deontay should fight anymore. I kind of already verbalized my opinion on that. But you know, Parker, when he knew he had Wilder in trouble, he just laid into him. He let loose. Now, he never had that chance, or that was never there with Zhang, because he never really had Zhang in that kind of trouble like Wilder was. So, you know, we got to give it to Parker for kind of just maintaining his composure and just sticking to presumably what the game plan was, which was to pick apart Zhang and just not get out of pocket, because Zhang is too dangerous for you to go wild on, because he does have that very smooth straight left, and he can fight on the inside. So notice that, you know, Joseph would tie up on the inside when it came to that. But for the most part, you know, and to his credit, Joseph didn't resort to that, just trying to tie Zhang up by you know, grabbing underhooks or around the waist. He would go in and then angle out, pivot out. And I really like the way Joseph used his rhythm and his tempo changes to just to offset Zhilei a little bit and get Zhilei too hesitant to start throwing a lot of punches. I could tell Zhilei was trying to time him, but, you know, by Joseph constantly switching which side he was slipping to, he made himself made his head this very moving target. And so that's why Zhilei had so much trouble just getting going, really. So now some people have verbalized that they're not really interested in the rematch, but you know, in all fairness, it's the champ's kind of right. The person who's holding the belt, you know, they have a right to that rematch clause, and they earned it. So I can't begrudge Zhilei, Team Zhilei, for if they exercise that rematch clause. But in a sense, it's almost more interesting. So what happens after that fight? We'll assume they have the rematch. What happens for Parker after that fight? And I think it's wonderful. He's kind of lined himself up to challenge, you know, Usyk, Fury, or Joshua, which is terrific for him, because any one of those three fights should not only be a great fight, but it should be a very good payday for Joseph Parker. So, you know, there's only upside to all of this for Parker at this point, and you have to take your hat off to him, because he's been grinding away, as we say, not so much in the dark, but he's just been steadily grinding away, and he's gone through several evolutions. You can see this in how his fighting style or his fighting techniques have evolved. Take a look at some of his early fights. He kind of leaned over his front foot a little bit too much and had his hands down, which I was not a fan of that. But I really love the way he's sort of really upgraded himself to be able to use great defensive head movement and work both downstairs and upstairs. that was another tactic I think he did well in this fight, even though his investment to the body did wind up with a couple maybe arguably low blows. I'm not sure how if those were in fact below the belt line, but in any case, congrats to Joseph Parker on securing that W. You can tell he worked his rear end off in camp, just by how he fought. Very high pace, high punch output. You don't just get that way working mitts. You've got to work the heavy bag like heck, and you've got to put in tough rounds in sparring sessions. It's just the conditioning is totally different, as all you fighters out there know. Great. So let's move on to Anthony Joshua versus Francis NGANNOU. I mean, as I said, I wasn't really super hyped for that as a so-called boxing match, because I just didn't feel it was really going to be a high-level boxing match, which it wasn't, because it takes two to tango, as they say. And hats off to Joshua for just doing the right thing and getting the job done, and getting the job done in dramatic fashion. Now, I don't think... Okay, so Joshua dropped Francis NGANNOU with his 1-2 right in the first round. And I don't think Francis ever recovered from that. He didn't recover from that between rounds. I did not get to see the corner work there, so I don't know how competent or incompetent his cutmen and cornermen were at trying to revive Francis. There's a couple things you do when your fighter gets dropped like that. Mostly it involves ice and cold water. Okay, but so Francis starts the second round already kind of in the hole, so to speak. He still looked a little bit dazed in the eyes coming out for the second round. And so again, Joshua throws a right which connects, but then they fall together, kind of chest to chest type thing. And then as they separate, Joshua goes to throw a left hook, which doesn't really connect. He connects with his arm, but that's kind of enough of a push that drops Francis again. So he didn't connect, and from what I saw, he did not connect with the fist of his left hook, but there was just enough force there, and Francis was already off balance and stunned again from the right hand, so Francis went down a second time. And then shortly thereafter, I think Anthony just knew Francis was done, so he didn't even bother trying to touch him with that jab. He just kind of put his left hand out there and just came winging with that right hand and just knocked him out. Francis was out before he hit the ground because his knees buckled in that uncomfortable way, right? And then he fell with his butt towards his ankles, right? He's like, his knees are totally buckled as he's falling to the ground, to the canvas. So, and of course the referee just waved it off immediately because he knew what was up. But so a couple of observations based on, I think, what I said in the lead up. I don't think Francis sparred enough with strong boxers for whatever reason, because look at his guard. It's that MMA guard I was telling you guys about. He was holding his right right hand almost as if he was getting ready to do a drill with a partner and like catch the punch or something. And it's like, you don't do that in boxing sparring ever. I mean, you got to keep that glove closer to your face and then just rotate the wrist to parry, or better than that, just just don't be there, move your upper torso so you're not there to slip the punch, rather than parry. But he's showing him, when you do this, like, and like catcher's mitt type thing, it's almost like you're showing the other person, hey, I'm ready to parry your punch. It's like, I can recall getting yelled at by Lennox Blackmore about doing that. It's like, he's like, you know, what are you doing? Like, you're showing them that you want to parry? Like, so how's that gonna help? You know. So after being chastised once about that, I never did it again. But my point is, it's a little more acceptable to have that kind of guard that he had in MMA practice because you have the much smaller gloves. But the fact that Francis was doing the MMA type guard where he held his hand position in a boxing fight kind of shows me, you know, maybe you didn't spar hard against boxers, because I would think that they would have kind of shown you that that's not good, because they would have nailed you with maybe with a 1-2 or maybe even with a left hook. I don't know. In any case, yeah, I questioned Ngannou's corner before the fight, and I guess I'm still questioning it now because I'm just curious to know how many rounds of sparring with a high-level pro boxer, you know, how many rounds did Francis do? The general rule of thumb is you are supposed to do minimum 10 times the number of rounds of your fight. So in other words, in camp, Ngannou should have gotten in a bare minimum of 100 rounds of good, solid sparring, boxing sparring, not boxing sparring with an MMA training partner, boxing sparring with another heavyweight boxer who's really coming to try to take your head off. Those of you guys with fight experience know probably that there is a big difference between MMA sparring and boxing sparring. And boxing sparring, as my trainer told me years ago, okay, the only difference between boxing sparring and a fight is you don't go in for the kill. You're going in there with bad intentions, you're trying to hit the other person hard, and you're not going to pull your punches. If you manage to land a hard punch, you might ease off a little bit, but only, you know, only for a bit, because they're trying to do the same thing to you. And that's how it needs to be, because you need to train, not just like your conditioning, it's like mental conditioning. You know, you got to get used to being in there with someone who's trying to hurt you, someone who has bad intentions, and you have to just physically know what it feels like to like let loose with your punches. I'm a different kind of sore after sparring than I am after doing any type of other workout, whether it's weights or hitting the heavy bag, just because like you just use different muscles in your, particularly in your arms and sometimes in your back, than you do in any other type of hard training. So now to compare, in MMA we don't really go like full out like you do in boxing, mainly because there's just too great a risk of injury. And by injury I don't necessarily mean just taking punches and kicks to the head, of course. Nobody wants to like really let loose with small gloves to the head or kicks to the head, but it's also, you've got the grappling aspect, and if you start going crazy hard with the grappling, it's almost guaranteed you're going to get a shoulder injury or a knee injury, and it's going to require surgery. So it's almost like, it is understood in MMA sparring, we don't go full tilt. You can go full tilt on drills, go full tilt on mitts with a trainer, go full tilt, of course, on the bags, but not on another human being for MMA. So I'm saying all that to ask the question, does Francis Ngannou's corner understand that? Because Dewey Cooper, even though he had more boxing pro fights than he did kickboxing pro fights, just from what I've seen from him, I'm not at all impressed with him as a boxing trainer. I don't really like how he does mitts, and I don't know. I think there's a lack of knowledge in Ngannou's corner. Oh, and Eric Nicksick is a former football player, so he certainly doesn't know the difference between MMA sparring and boxing sparring from how it feels. It's certainly something you would have to have done yourself to know the difference, because you know whether you have bad intentions or not, right, in the sparring session, and you know what level of bad intentions and what level of really trying to hurt somebody is appropriate for that session. If you've never done either one, then I don't think you can understand the difference. Okay, so that's my one big question for the Francis Ngannou camp. Do you understand that if you want to be a pro boxer, you've got to spar hard, and you've got to get good sparring partners for that? You can't use your MMA guys. You can't simulate this on mitts. Okay, so that's effectively, you know, good for Anthony Joshua. I don't want to harp too much on what Francis Ngannou didn't do well, because he's not really a pro boxer. He's an MMA powerhouse. He's an MMA champion who decided he wants to experience boxing because that was his first love. So you can't really begrudge him that, but I don't consider him a pro boxer just because he's had 2 pro boxing fights. But good for Anthony Joshua, because he did exactly the right thing. He got Ngannou out of there ASAP, and he did so in as dramatic fashion as you could ask for, which is the actual KO, a one-punch KO that followed, of course, by softening up by dropping him a couple times. But he did exactly the right thing. He never sort of fell for the mental games or the media games, especially with the MMA media. And I really appreciated the fact that Anthony Joshua was a class act at the press conference. You know, he gave Ngannou props. He you know, as I say, big upped Ngannou. He spoke about trying to collaborate with him in supporting supporting Ngannou's charity work. So, you know, he didn't gloat. He wasn't ugly about, you know, knocking him the heck out, and just kept it classy. So good for Anthony Joshua. He repped boxing well, so thank you for doing that, Anthony. And you know, now again, only upside for Anthony Joshua. Now, unfortunately for him, we can't move him up in the ranking, right? Because Tyson Fury's next, and then Alexander Usyk, and we're kind of waiting till May to see how that plays out. But I think Joshua has certainly kind of secured his position as the valid opponent, or the valid person to call out the winner of that fight. If he wants, you know, if Usyk comes out on top, you know, even though he's down 0-2 versus Usyk, he is in the right position to call for that third fight with Usyk. If Fury wins, of course, you know, I think we'd all love to see that fight. So Joshua doesn't move anywhere in terms of the rankings, but he's certainly, his boxing stock, his fight stock just went way up. So good for him. And Joseph PARKER and Zhilei Zhang, I think we could argue that they swap places. Maybe it's only momentary, because maybe they will have the rematch, and maybe Zhang will get it together and pull off the W, or, you know, maybe they both take fights versus other opponents. I think either one is valid, right? Like, it sort of depends if Team Zhilei wants to institute that rematch clause and try to get that interim belt back. I guess they're sort of hoping if they have the belt, they can, again, just like Joshua is, kind of hang out and see how May plays out, and then make a pitch for, you know, any one of those 3 fighters, depending on how things go. But that time may be kind of running out for Zhang. I'm thinking there's no way they can schedule that fight within 3 months. Fight went the distance. Both men need to rest. Joseph Parker now has the belt, so he can kind of, I think he's in the shot caller's seat, as they say. You know, if it happens towards the end of the year, I think that would be fair. But to make it any sooner than 4 or 5 months out would not make sense. 12-round heavyweight fight. You need time to rest and recuperate, and then you have to rebuild back up for that next fight, which, you know, you have to assume it's going to go the distance. So that would put us well past May, I think, for a Zhang Parker rematch. So then they should already know where Fury, Usyk, and Joshua kind of lie at that point. But what do you guys think? Do you want to see the Zhang Parker rematch? Who would you like to see Anthony Joshua face next, regardless of how May plays out? If it plays out, who do you want to see Joshua fight next? Who do you think he has the best chances against? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you very much for listening.